Now we go to our good friend Warren Sawkiw here on rawmike.com. Good morning, Warren.
Hey, good morning, Mike. Good morning, David.
Such a somber day today. And first of all, we should say, or at least ask anyways, Warren, what was your connection or your relationship that you had with Roy Halladay personally?
Yes, a great question, and thanks for having me on. It's a sobering kind of day after learning yesterday what happened. So Roy, as many have said, never really let that many in. I interviewed him. I traveled with the team, as you know. I did 2 years broadcasting next to Jerry Howarth, and I was able to interview Roy a number of times. One of the most vivid memories that I have was traveling on the team charter, Mike and David, and because we sat at the front of what would be the cabin part of the charter, so all the executives and the coaches and that would sit what you would think of as first class. But I mean, the whole plane was first class, let's face it. But we sat at kind of the front seats of the back cabin. That's where the broadcasters sat. There was 2 rows there that were designated for broadcasters and others. And so on the one side, if you imagine looking to the front of the plane, on the right side, Jerry and me sat. I sat usually next to the window, Jerry beside me. And then beside them, directly opposite would be Roy sitting next to the window, and Donovan Santos, the strength and conditioning coach at the time. And I always would watch them because Roy would come in, and like Roy always did, he had his routines, right? And they would sit up their laptops and whatever, and they would start watching movies throughout the flight, and or Roy would be watching his starts or doing his preparation for whatever team we were going next to face or whatever his start. But I remember them watching movies, and I remember how happy he was. And I didn't, we'd make comments and you'd chat, but you kind of let the players on the plane have their space. So I'd say that the greatest times in my memory would be, down on the field, getting a chance to chat with Roy, having an interview with him, asking him about the challenges he went through and, battling, going back to the minor leagues and then coming back up. And those were some of the special times, but I'll never forget those charter flights. And every time we got on, and I think back now, and there was Roy Halladay sitting watching a movie and laughing and smiling and just being, he really was a big kid at heart. And, it really kind of shone through with what he did with his kids and the way he gave back to the community.
You also touched upon something that I think a lot of the great ones truly do, and I think we're able to put him in that category. And Dave used the word earlier today, artistry, an artist, and I think that's so bang on. But there's also a real methodology to some of these guys, and for some people they would think, okay, so the greatest pitchers have to be the guys who go out and strike out everybody. But then there's also the kinds of cerebral guys, I think, in at least to his method, which was, well, why throw 3 pitches when if I can, throw a ball that gets them to put it on the ground and maybe get a double play. Maybe they do get a hit. But it seems like he could throw less pitches because he had a lot of complete games, and there was sort of a method to the madness. There was a way that he sort of figured out, I'm going to last longer if I can get these guys to put the ball on the ground, so therefore maybe sometimes the pitch count wasn't as high. I mean, there's a real genius to kind of what he did. Do you feel the same way about how he worked?
I am amazed at his rigor and discipline, and Mike and David, great points. I think about, and I was speaking to my wife last night, Amanda, about this, and I said, and I literally, tears came to my eyes because I said, he left an imprint on me. As I live my life today and the things that I learned about post leaving the broadcast booth and understanding, what it's like to be at the highest levels as a broadcaster, a major league broadcaster, when I, literally the fan approached me, for that role. And I really, I'd done broadcasting, I'd been on Sportsnet and that, but I didn't really have, the Tom Cheek credentials in that. I wasn't a lifetime broadcaster. And then to have it ripped away so quickly. And the way I relate this is that I got to AAA, and that's, a lot of people say, oh, that's really good and, great. Well, I didn't make it there, and Roy made it. Roy went back to A-ball to make it all the way back up. And the mental discipline and the toughness that he showed, and what he brought to that mound every day was that rigor and discipline. And I think about how he repeated his delivery but he was so strong mentally that he kept himself focused, and he took it to a whole other level. Like, not many could live. It was almost, I won't say robotic, but he could get into that zone where literally you looked at him and you looked right through him, and he didn't even see you barely. And that's a special place. And I think back, and, you know, as I said, you know, my wife and I, we get up 5 a.m, we're working out, and it's a daily routine now for us. And, you know, I look at it and I think a lot of that I learned from Roy, and a lot of it I learned that I can be better than others, and I can be better if I put the right work in and I do the right things and I have the right focus. So, you know, when I say and I look back that he left an imprint and what he meant to me and how I carry it on my life ever since I left that booth at the end of the 06 season, you know, that's where yesterday hit me like a ton of bricks.
Hey, Warren, good morning. Great talking to you, and thanks for joining us today. You touched on one thing when you told us about the story on the plane, and we hear a lot of different players, and it's funny. It's not only are you hearing teammates of Roy Halladay come out, but you're hearing a ton of players that he faced and the respect value. And I don't know if we've seen this in quite some time about how many people are coming out and saying that this was a guy I watched, this was a guy I modeled, and this for all intents purposes, this was the opposition, wasn't it?
Oh, I'll never forget, because you think back, right? Like, life is precious. The moments, you know, you get into a position that I was fortunate enough to have, and you get to be around the greatest. And you know, I had a chance to interview, Derek Jeter, and, you know, to think about going back to that and to think about and remembering, you know, now hearing what Jeter says, but then even how much he hated and how he struggled against Roy. Like, Jeter never took days off. We know that. But I think if he could have taken days off, it would have been against Roy Halladay, because you're talking about, you know, one of the greatest to play the game in Jeter and longevity, and yet Roy made him look silly, right? And he, you know, I'm looking back at clips like A-Rod. You know, these are great hitters. And Roy just toyed with them, right? And it was game in and game out. And, you know, I think you think about a stopper, and I remember Jerry saying, like, okay, it's Halladay. You know, team's lost 4 in a row. Here comes Roy. Yep. You know, he's the stopper. You know, it's going to be a victory today. And sure enough, more times than not, guys, Roy pulled out a victory.
Yeah, it really was. Now, what else I also sensed just talking, and I covered the team just after you in 07, 08. Roy really kept to himself as well. I noticed even in the clubhouse, he wasn't the kind of guy that publicly would, you know, sit and joke, and he was very focused. Like, you talked about mechanics and being mechanical, and really, you know, he went to work and did a job that he loved, but when he was there, he was all business. Is that something you could speak on with your time covering the Jays as well?
Yes, it was, and you know, many players, because I'm listening to everybody. You know, it's just amazing. You know, I've heard Orlando Hudson. You know, of course, Buck Martinez, Dan Schulman, so many. Charlie Manuel talked about, you know, relationship. Yes. The one thing about Roy, and you knew it was genuine, but, you know, you have to be true to yourself. And Roy was very private and very closed, and really he was a humble, almost shy individual. And he wasn't that outgoing, gregarious kind of people person. Like, yeah. He just didn't have that in him. Like, that wasn't Roy, right? Like, he wouldn't have been true to himself being that. He was never that guy. You never saw that. Maybe once or twice you would see it in a very rare occasion, and that could be on the plane. It could be in some team setting or whatever that nobody else outside would see that. But you're right. I think what he realized is that for him to step outside of that comfort zone of what he learned through Harvey Dorfman and, you know, the mental side of baseball and going back in the struggles, he never wanted to go there again. Like, it was a personal affront to him that he had to go there. He literally, you know, rejected the Jays when they wanted him to go down. But you have to know in your heart of hearts, because I battled this. Like, I battled the sports psychology and speaking, you know, to sports psychologists. And these were times when that I really had to struggle with these things. And so at the end of the day, I look back and I think about Roy, and I think about what he did and what he meant to not only the team, but to others who look up to people who are really, focused on something and are really striving for something. And that's, like I said, I pull it back to the fact that he left that imprint on me and many others. And that's what you're seeing, the outpouring of love and, the thought about what he meant to really everybody in the game of baseball. And, you know what, it really touches my heart to see this outpouring. And, 40 years old, gosh, guys, like way, way too young.
Yeah, it is very difficult, and I think a lot of people who maybe aren't even the biggest of baseball fans are looking at purely the loss of a 40-year-old dad with two boys. That is particularly heartbreaking, and then you get sort of where the sports world crosses a little bit, where generally people like to argue about who gets in Hall of Fames. They like to talk, is the guy a first ballot, a second ballot? Well, Roy Halladay, when he gets in, when someone goes in posthumously, it's tough enough, but I think the emotion that probably and conceivably could happen on that day is going to be incredibly difficult, not only to watch, I think, but just knowing that, a guy who achieved what he achieved, and like, granted, I feel he'll be looking down on that day on his family, but that still isn't going to make it any less difficult, and I believe that that's probably going to happen.
Yes, I know. Well, I think about, you think about Pat Burns and others who've gone in, like going in posthumously is a difficult one when, you look at what he did and you think about the two Cy Youngs and 8-time All-Star and the throwback, right? Like, this is an individual, I can't tell you how many times he led in complete games, but this just doesn't happen. Like, that doesn't happen anymore. And he did it like year after year, it seemed like. And it was like, who is this individual? Why does he, he keeps himself in such great shape, and he's so pitch efficient that he can do this. And to me, the greatest need to be remembered, and he will be remembered. And you know what? I mean, I think he was going in regardless, gentlemen. He's definitely going in now because passing away this young, I think his numbers are all there. And then I don't see any reason why he doesn't go into the Hall of Fame. But it'll be a tough day. And, you think about other tough days for players. Like, this has touched me twice now, guys, because I played with Corey Lytle, who you remember played with the Jays and then went to the Yankees, and he died in a single, commuter plane accident in Midtown Manhattan. And, now Roy, and, I think of other great ones we've lost, and, it's a shame to see that. But I think back, guys, I can't say enough about Roy Halladay and what he meant to me, just as, I didn't get to know him truly like a great friend or whatever, and very few did. Like, literally, you heard teammates say that. But the mark he left on me is vivid, and it's etched in there, and it'll never go away. And I thank Roy Halladay every day for the fact that I got to be that close and to see him work at his craft every day and dedicate himself to being the best he could be.
Warren, thanks so much for joining us here this morning. Again, not an easy topic, and but it is sharing the stories and personal effects that sort of have people feel a little closer to it. And again, it's almost that process of mourning that people do go through. So even today, for those that are watching here on camera or those that will download the podcast, I know they really appreciated your words today, and so do I.
Thanks for having me on, gentlemen. It's always a pleasure, and I'm really glad that I could see. It's cathartic to speak about somebody that you looked up to like that. So thank you very much, and anytime you want me on, I'm there.
Well said.
Thanks, Warren.
That is Warren Sawkiw joining us here this morning, and what a marvelous job he did. And cathartic was really the way to put it, and that's exactly how it was for us here this morning, listening to those words from Warren Sawkiw.
What? Just become best friends? Yep.